Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming this evening, and thank you for those people who are tuning in online. My name's Andy Tebb. I'm very lucky I get to look after our product engineering labs in the UK, so where we do exciting things for various clients on an ongoing basis, whether it's mobile apps or just product that they want delivering of whatever sort, but we get to work in collaboration with people and do some of the best loved products in the world. If you guys get a chance and you're here in the office today, it's probably worth going down our wall of fame at the back and you can see how our products impact your lives every day. Just some general housekeeping. The people around wearing Global Logic branded gear, and in fact the presenter will be able to help you with any questions that you might have, but particularly in the event of things like a fire alarm, because none is planned for this evening. Okay, so if you hear it, it's real, and they'll escort you out and they'll show you where the fire exits are, okay? No, not yet. No, if the talk goes badly, which it won't, maybe we'll invoke. But there will also be refreshments afterwards. You know, chance for people to talk, chance for you to discuss what you've learned tonight, but also while you're in the building, if you have any concerns, if there is an emergency, look for one of the colleagues behind you and they'll be able to help you, okay? Tonight, the reason for the DevOps Playground, it's an independent thing, it's not a Global Logic thing, we just sponsor it and provide the space. We think it's important that people get to play with technology, that people get a hands-on element, that people get to understand the reasons and how a product works before they get to have a go on it. Something like contracts, incredibly important in development. It would make my life easier, it would make the whole world's life easier if it was done a lot more often in the development journey. Grace is going to talk to you tonight about some practical ways to actually make that work in terms of tools like PACT. That's the how. Hopefully we're all comfortable with the why. If we're not, it'd be worth you reading and getting used to. But otherwise, the purpose tonight is to have fun, to get some hands-on experience. Just to reiterate, if you have any concerns, if you can't get to your VM, if something's not working, shout, someone in the room will help you. If you're online and you're similarly struggling, use the Slack channels. Otherwise though, I hope you have a great time, hope you enjoy it. I've seen a very early version of this talk from Grace and it was excellent, so I'm sure it's much better now. So hope you have a great evening. Cheers.
Thanks, Andy. Cool. Yes, thank you everyone for joining us here in the London office, and hello to those that are watching online. We're going to be getting hands-on with PACT and MUnit. My name's Grace Sandford. There is my LinkedIn link. Memorize it now. You've got 5 seconds before I click the next button. I'm joking. Yeah, so a bit about me. I'm a delivery consultant for Global Logic UK&I. I like to refer to myself as being more of a tooling engineer with a specialism in test automation and quality assurance. That's mainly because most of the time the things I'm doing is making tools work together or working on particular tools around test automation. Just want to be completely clear, I'm not a MuleSoft developer. So please do not ask me MuleSoft questions. I will probably struggle to answer them. I can maybe answer a few about MUnit. But yeah, that's not my area of expertise. I've just worked with MuleSoft and MUnit and PACT and got them working together. Speaking of PACT, I've been working with the PACT tool for over a year now. So yeah, I've got quite a lot of experience. I've worked with it in .NET. I did that last year as a playground. I've also worked with the JavaScript version as well. And also I'm a DevOps Playground committee member. I've been a committee member for over 3 years now, getting close to 4 years. Cool. All right, so a little bit of what we're going to cover. So I'll just briefly go over what PACT is and MuleSoft and MUnit. These are the tools we're going to be working with. A little bit about the problem statement, so how this came about, for what we're going to be doing today. Then I'm going to go over the solution, so we can understand from a high level how all these tools are working together. And then we'll move to a hands-on live walkthrough, so make sure you've got your laptops ready for that part. And then just summarizing at the end some of the caveats with this solution, because not every solution is perfect. there's always room for improvements, but there's also really useful use cases there, which hopefully you will see while we get hands-on with it. Cool. All right, so what is PACT, MuleSoft, MUnit? For anyone that doesn't know, PACT is a contract testing tool. It's consumer-driven and it's open source. So all the PACT code is there, open source on GitHub, so you can take a look there. And PACT has also, the PACT Foundation has also given us some stickers. So thank you very much there. MuleSoft is a platform that gives IT and tools, that gives IT the tools to automate everything. What we're going to be using from MuleSoft is the Anypoint platform. This provides a way of connecting data and managing APIs. So we're going to be looking at the API side of things. MUnit is the Mule native testing tool for Mule apps and APIs. It's got the capability of most unit testing tools, such as being able to mock behavior, along with the pre and post setup for tests that you want to run. Cool. All right, so the existing problem. So this came about from the language change of Mule 4, which is, as of Mule 4, MuleSoft want everyone to align to the Mule way. So that means you can no longer directly extend from the functional MUnit suite, which is previously how we were able to run like JUnit tests and stuff like that. So now we're going to be following the Mule way, which is through Anypoint Studio, and I'll be showing how we can use PACT. So that's the problem. So it works for Mule 3 versions and lower. You can do it this way. But as of Mule 4, if you want to keep up to the latest, you can't follow this way anymore. All right. So a bit about the solution. I very quickly threw this diagram together to try and explain, convey, show how these tools are going to work in Anypoint Studio. Is we've got a Mule consumer API. And in there, we've also got MUnit tests. Inside of the MUnit tests, we can run Java code. Inside of this Java code is where we're going to have a server handler, which is going to be setting up, I don't know if you can see my cursor. Yes. Setting up the PACT JVM server through Java code, which is going to run outside of Anypoint Studio, but we're going to start it from within, if that makes sense, hopefully. We'll see when we get going with it. Then we're going to have a PACT interaction handler that's going to hold some of the PACT code for creating the PACT DSL objects. So when we want to set up the interactions there. And finally, we're going to have the PACT mock provider handler. This is going to create the calls, the API calls to the PACT server to create that PACT mock server, which is going to be our mock server emulating the provider. Then, instead of mocking within Anypoint Studio, we're going to instead change the endpoint or the URL that the consumer is going to call, which is then instead going to be set up to call the mock provider server instead of the real live service. So we'll see that in a moment as well. So is there any questions so far about this? No? Okay, I think that's pretty much everything. So we've got the PACT server running, and then we've got Mule and MUnit still working within itself. All right, so that was quite a quick presentation. When we did the lab, it was about an hour when we did the dry run, so it's going to take a bit more time on the lab side of things. So you'll find the link here, which is lab.devopsplayground.org. So if you go to there, you'll be able to get your instance details. And if there are any questions that come up while you're thinking or from online, I'm happy to answer them. And perhaps if people have got their instance, they can give a thumbs up, and then maybe some emojis in the chat if there's anyone online. Your
Wi-Fi password.
A password? Oh, Wi-Fi. I think we can get that up on the screen for everyone if you're not connected yet to Wi-Fi. There we go. And maybe someone helpful could type the lab URL, if that's possible. And on the text. Yeah. Thank you. Ever the helpful assistance. Lab DevOps Playground. Yeah, that looks right.
Is that the username, Labs DevOps Playground or what's that? Is that the username? Because it's asking me for a meetup username or whatever.
Okay, so meetup username, just enter your name from meetup. I think we might have made it so that it can just be any name. But yeah, try to use your own name. I'm being laughed at now. Is that correct? Good. But yeah, we've tried to improve things here from the committee with running the playgrounds a little bit easier. Cool. Well, I think we've got. Oh, it's back to my screen now. Cool. All right, so once you've got your lab instance, you should have a VNC URL opened up. It'll also be useful to open up the coder. There'll be a pop-up, just click trust and trust like so. And then a Weti terminal. You don't need to have the Weti open, but I will be using the Weti just because it'll be easier for everyone to see. Other than maybe I'll make that a bit bigger. There we go. Cool. And then there's the README as well, link that'll be there. Yeah. And it's just those 4 tabs that you need. I mean, the Weti's optional. So, has everyone got everything up?
Could you just tell me the password when you go to the terminal?
Password when you go to the terminal. So that will be in when you enter the username. If you scroll down, there'll be password. Yeah, yeah, that one. I can also say the password. So when you want to log in. So if you log into it's the same password for all of them. So it's MuleSoft is our password. And then for Weti. Oh, I typed that wrong. Oh, I got disconnected. There we go. Cool. Okay, I'm gonna continue unless anyone needs more time. So for these pop-ups, you can just click on Ask Me Later and then just skip the setup for here for Ubuntu. All right, so when we get to this, you'll notice there is a terminal here. So any terminal commands you can use in this one here, but I'll be using the Weti one. Both of them work. If you go to Anypoint Studio, and then you need to click on Anypoint Studio to open up Anypoint Studio. It will take a little bit of time. All right, so when you get to the workspace, we actually need to change it to, by going back to Playground, and then to Workdir, and then hands-on with MUnit and PACT. And that's it, just click Open. So your workspace should be set up here. And then when you've set the workspace, Let's see if I can make this bigger. Nope. Click launch. And then just for convenience, if you see this toggle here, this little blue tab, if you click on that, you can change the scaling. So on none, I'm going to change it to local, just so that everything is on my screen. Okay. When any point's open, I'm going to just uncheck the share anomalous analytics, but you can keep it checked if you like. And just close any pop-ups that appear on the side there. Okay, click continue first, and then you can close it. I'm just going to maximize it, like so. All right, so has everyone opened it up? I'll take sciences, yes. Cool. So next what we want to do is import the files, the project, sorry. So if you go to File, Import, and then Anypoint Studio, and then click on Anypoint Studio Project from File System, and then click Next. Okay, and then for project root, click the 3 dots, and you should see probably something like my screen, which is just blank. Has everyone got a blank screen? Yeah, good. That's because we're doing some infrastructure hosting stuff to make this possible to do. The actual, if you use it normally on your computer and it's downloaded it, you won't have that issue at all. So just go close everything and just have Anypoint Studio open. Then what we're going to do is go to File, Switch Workspace, Other, and then just click Launch again. I don't know why we have to do this, but for our infrastructure of the Ubuntu version, we need to do it this way. Hello.
Hi.
Do you need help getting set up?
Yeah, yes. If you can.
Cool. Can we get someone to help, please? Thank you. Cool. All right. So when that's reopened, now we go again to File, Import. And then again, Anypoint Studio from Project File. And then if you click Next, and then the 3 dots, you should now see some files. Yay. So cool. For some reason, it's not put it in the correct working directory that we set at the beginning. So we just need to go back again to that. So you click on Playground, Workday, Hands-on with MUnit and PACT. And this time click on PACT MUnit example. And just check that the PALM.xml file is there in that folder.
The one that's coming up from is saying hands-on with MUnit and PACT. That's all I'm getting.
So, is that is it blank with no folders?
PACT MUnit example.
Yep, PACT MUnit example. Yep, so if you click on that, you should see 2 folders and 2 files. And then you click Open.
Open which one?
So it should show like this. And then if you uncheck Copy Project into Workspace, you can click Finish, and that will start importing. If anyone gets stuck, the README document does have the first step documented, so making sure that you set the Workday to Home, Workday, Hands-on with MUnit and PACT. And then we go to Import from File. And then we do it again with Anypoint Studio and Next. Then it's blank. That is correct. Because then we need to close that and go back to File, Switch Workspace to Other, And then when we get it open again like so, we just click launch one more time. And then we can go back to Playground, Workday, hands-on with PACT, and then PACT MUnit example, and then click open. And it should give you this layout. So that's from step 1. Yeah, step 1, set up the environment is where we are. Anyone having any issues? Happy to pop over. If you just want to put your hand up, if anyone wants some help. Cool. All right, so we should see one project imported. If I scroll up, so PACT MUnit example, I'll just collapse it all so we can see we've got one now. We do have another one, which will be the provider. So if we go again to File, Import, Anypoint Studio project from File System, and then if you click on the browser to Playground, Workday, Hands-on, this time we'll click on T-Supplier. And if you double click on it, it'll open up and you should see one folder and 2 files, one of them being the PALM XML. And then just click on Open. And uncheck Copy Project into Workspace, and then click Finish. And that will be the last one that we need to do for importing. Yeah. And then it should import successfully with no errors. All right. So to get started, we'll first look at the MUnit test. So if you go to PACT MUnit example, so the first project we imported, and then to SRC test MUnit folder, you should see there's a file there called get t-test suite. If you double click, that will open up. You might want to rearrange your workspace a little bit. It's a little bit delicate, but if you can do it. There we go. And you should see very similar contents. It should be the exact same. So we've got our before test suite, then we've got our test body with behavior, execution, validation. We can see that for behavior, we're not using any mocks or spies through MUnit because we're doing that ourselves with PACT. And then there's an after test step as well. So if we take a look, we've got a lot happening in the before step. So this is all the setup that we need to get PACT started and running. So we've got our start PACT service. So if I slide over, back to the slide. So that will be starting this over here, the PACT JVM server. And then we're going to set some PACT arguments. And that, if I scroll this up again. Oops, I seem to have lost the scroll. Oh, there it was. There we go. So that is reading from a Dreamweave or DataWeave file. So if we can find that, it's in SRC test resources, then get t, and then set get t PACT args DWL. And this is going to be our PACT arguments that we're going to send through to a function from MUnit. So this is how we can parameterize the setup. So we've got consumer, which is my online T-store, and then a provider, which will be T-supplier. So we've got pretty much our front-end API and our back-end API. So the whole premise is a tea shop, an online tea shop, and they make API calls to their tea supplier to buy more tea. We've got an upon receiving to set up the PACT provider states. We don't use that, but I always like to use upon receiving as a good practice. because it gives a bit more descriptions to the PACT test. And then the method, which is going to be a GET request, and the status 200, and a consumer version of 1. Cool. So at this point, you might be wondering, what is my online tea store, and what is tea supplier, and what are we trying to test? Well, I can show you that because it's right at the beginning of the README. So if I go to here. All right, so this repo that we've now imported into MuleSoft, we've got 2 APIs. The first API is the tea store. That currently makes some simple requests to the tea supplier. We've got 3 endpoints, get tea supply, so that will return all the tea. And then we've got tea supply and a name to return a requested tea. And then a post request to order tea. The only one that has been fully implemented is the first one. The other 2 are still in development, so we won't get to that bit during this playground to begin with. But later on, perhaps I'll add some more in and we can see those as well. Here's the output. So the provider has said, this is the type of data we will return. This is what it looks like, the structure. We'll send an object in the response with T, and T is an array object that has an object with mint as for the name, or English breakfast as an example. And then we've got types, which can be either decaffeinated or caffeinated, and supply, which is a number or an integer.
Okay.
And then cost. Cost is not an integer, but a string with a number and some Great British pounds as the currency instead of using the pound symbol. And then also cost can be a float or decimal number. Yes, so then I've documented some extra things for as it develops, such as being able to get it by the name, which will just return just that one object. And then when you order a tea, what it will return is an ID for your order ID and the name of the tea that you wanted to buy, along with the amount that you've put through to buy, and then it'll calculate the cost and say, okay, you order 200 mints, it will be £400. So quite expensive tea. But yeah, hopefully it's good. Hopefully it's good tea. All right, so that's how the provider and the consumer are set up. That's what they've been given and what the consumer is going to assume based on writing these tests. So if we go back to the test, we've got the set endpoint. So you can see we're sending it to API version 1 T supply. So that's the first request that was documented. And then if we go to declare PACT, that's just going to create an empty variable to hold our class instance when we initiate it. All right, and then we've got some other ones now going into Java, such as setting up the PACT request body and getting the PACT DSL body. So we'll take a bit more of a look at these ones in a moment, along with initiating the PACT contract builder. So this will create the instance class that will be set to this variable in here. And if we go to, if we go to here, we can see this is the variable that will set it as PACT contract builder. And then right at the end is where we start the PACT mock server. So if I go back to here, the PACT mock provider handler, that will create the API requests to the server, which will then tell it to create the PACT mock provider with the PACT interactions that we set up in that Java code. So that will then start up that mocked provider service for us, all before we start the test. And then if we go to the test, we've got a set event to trigger the GET request. which will just call the flow for making that get T supply request. So, sorry, that's the wrong folder. If we go to SRC main Mule, and it's got brackets flows. If you click on the T-store XML, this is where you can see the MuleSoft code or the Mule code with the request get all T, make order, and get T by name. This is a very in development type of state. So we're not using any databases connection. Instead, the consumer has just got everything mocked out. Sorry, the provider has everything mocked out. So the consumer will just make the requests. But on the provider, all the responses are mocked out, which I'll show you a bit later when we get to the provider side of the test. Cool. And then afterwards, so once it runs that flow against the mocked provider, we have an MUnit assertion. So we're still using MUnit's capabilities for validation here. This is really key to this solution because it will ensure that we've set everything up correctly with PACT and that we're getting the correct response based on our assumptions that we've set to the mock provider. So it's still giving you that assertion power from MUnit, and it also still counts towards your code coverage metrics and your reporting metrics within MUnit itself. So we're getting a little bit of extra there. And then finally, once we've validated that everything's correct, then we write the PACT file. If the assertion fails, no PACT file will be written. The test will just end and move to the after test and cleanup. That's to make sure we don't create PACT files that are incorrect. So that's how we're getting our assurance there with our MUnit validation. All right, and then the after, we're just going to do some cleanup. So we're going to stop the PACT mock service. So we're just going to close down all of these and make sure that we've not got anything running kind of by itself outside of the test when we're done. Cool. All right, so I guess everyone's itching now to do things after listening to me speak. So if you right-click, we can click on Run MUnit Suite. And if you give it, it's relatively quick. It should only take a couple seconds, really, maybe 30 seconds. Cool. So you should see some red output text when it runs. So if you read the text, you can see it's complaining about that we don't have a configuration set for the property value env. So we need to set up an environment variable. So that's how we're changing the endpoint to localhost to hit our mock provider. So to set that up, we go to Run, and then Run Configurations. And then check that it's on MUnit and then PACT MUnit example. And then just click on Environment. This is where, if we click the Add button, that we can enter the environment variable. So it's complaining about env. And then what it wants is local as the value. And if you click OK, it should be there. There are occasionally some issues where you can't type in. If you have that issue, it's documented in the README with how to resolve it. Let me see if I can quickly find it. That's the import. So I've gone through all of that setup. Local, yep. So it's just here in the small text here. If you encounter an issue where you can't type into that box. Cool. Has everyone managed to add the environment variable? That's following along? Yep, cool. So just click Apply and then Run. And now the test should pass, fingers crossed. Yeah, so it's not errored yet, so that's a good sign. Okay, all right, so on the left, on the MUnit tab, you should see it's now turned green, so that shows that it's passed. If we scroll up just a little bit, the scroll bar is a little bit small. Whoops. There we go. We can see some text that gets written from the Java code into the console. So we've got starting the builder and then some PACT interactions. Along with that, PACT request. So PACT request is the API request that we send to the PACT server to create the PACT mock server with. So if we, now that that's run and then it's passed, it's written a PACT file. So we can take a look at that just to check that it's where we expect it to be. So if you go to the VS Code tab and click on PACT MUnit example, so drop down on project and hands-on PACT MUnit example. The PACT files by default will be saved into target PACTs. And then here you'll see my online tstore-tsupplier.json. So this is our PACT file. It's got the details that I showed earlier with the consumer name, and then the interactions. This is all generated through our Java code where we're using PACT. And we've got some generators here as well. So for example, we can see that it's expecting an array, and the T in the 0 index of that array should have a cost. We've got max and min, and we're expecting random int, so it's quite easy to read. It is easier to read in the PACT Broker, which we're not going to touch, but there is, like in the bonus section, how you can set it up with the broker at the end if you want to see how that works. And then we've got a regex for the type with caffeinated or decaffeinated. Yeah, so we can see that that's gone through, and that looks correct to me. Right, so now that's run, what we want to do is check it against the provider. So if we just toggle down the PACT MUnit example and now go to our provider, here we want to go into SLC main Mule and open up tsupplier. And again, once that's open, right click and then click on Run Project. While we're waiting for that, does anyone have any questions so far? Any questions online? No? Cool. So that's run. You should see some output with status, and it should say failed. If we scroll up, there'll be some error again about not having the property key end. So like we did with the consumer side, we need to go to run configurations, and set up an environment variable. This time, make sure it's in Mule applications tsupplier, and then go to environment, and then click add. And we're just going to add that end with local once more. And then click apply and run. And then just click yes. And then it should show as it's a little bit slow when we get to the provider side because it's actually spinning up the provider. Cool. So we should see status and then deployed. So that means that the provider is now running locally. So now we need to run the provider tests. So in this tsupplier project, if you click on the POM XML file, and then go to source. And if you just scroll down to plugin, we're actually using the PACT Provider plugin where we've just set it up to run from here. So we've got it against localhost and then the port, which is all set through our configuration properties when we set the env to be local. So now if we go to Wetty, we can make sure you check your directory. So I just did a quick ls. We want to move to where our provider is. So I want to cd into workdir, just ls again, cd into hands-on with MUnit and PACT, ls again. And then we want to cd into tsupplier. And it's ls, and then you should see Mule artifact JSON, Palm, source, and target. So now we can run the Maven command, nvm pact verify. Okay, and this will start running with the plugin, the pact file that we've set up from our consumer tests against the running localhost provider. Okay, so if I scroll up, we can see that it failed and that we've got some errors outputted. So we've got 3 in total. So the first one is they expected it to be a string. Expected it to be integer, but received a string. So we need to take a look. Let's take a look first at the first error. So if we go back to BNC, and then back to get T test suite. So where we're setting all this up is with our Java code, with inside the T builder with the get T function. So that is actually located in the PACT MUnit example under SLC main Java. And if you open PACT, you can see we've got 4 Java files here. Each one is used as part of this solution. We're going to take a look at the T builder. Right, and in here, if you locate the get T function, we can see that we're setting up the PACT DSL JSON body. So with our, it said that cost was a string, so we need to change it to a string type. But if it's a string type, we can't enforce the number at the beginning. So if we just did a number, how can we verify that it's valid? So to be a little bit more strict here, we're going to use some regex. So we'll use the string matcher, similar to the caffeinated or decaffeinated. Cool, and then it'll turn red because we need to enter some regex here. So if you just change it to that. And the regex is in GitHub because I'm not a regex expert. So if I scroll down, here it is. So we've got string matcher cost, and to start with, we'll just do 2 square brackets with 0 to 9 to enforce numbers at the beginning, and then GBP. So if I go back to here, go 0 to 9, and then GBP. And if we just save that, yep, just make sure that it's saved. And then we need to regenerate that PACT file. So we have to run our consumer test again. You'll get a pop-up, just click yes. Cool. So while that's going, I'll talk a little bit more about the T builder. So you'll notice that we actually return an empty string. That's because with the GET requests, we need to not send anything in the body. So part of the code takes into account for this, and we'll look for a string, and then if it's just an empty string, it'll make it a JSON object. And then later on, we'll reset that interaction with the request body to just be empty with the optional missing. All right, so that's passed. Now we can run the provider one more time. It is in flows, main, Mule. There we go. So if we go back to tsupplier and just run tsupplier. We should see that it deployed. Just give it a bit more time. There we go. As soon as you get that deployed, you can then go back to Weti and do the same nvm pact verify command. I just press the up arrow to make it a little bit quicker, so you have to keep typing. And we should see one less error returned. So it'll still fail because we've not fixed the two other ones, like so. So we've got that first one is now gone with the GBP number integer string error that we had. So if we take a little bit more of a look at these last two errors, we can fix them both together. So we've got decaffeinated to match, and then this as the regex. Now we can't use the brackets, so that's incorrect. And also, if anyone's got really keen eyes for spelling mistakes, you'll notice that we're missing an E in our matcher. And then the second one is a little bit more complex. So it's expecting a list, but only of one element, but it received two. So here we're not setting up the packed DSL body correctly for it to be able to match all the elements returned. It's only just matching the first one and only expecting one. So here we can set it up. If we go back to the BNC and into get test suite, into tbuilder. All right, so the first thing we had was caffeinated, decaffeinated. So remove the brackets and correct the spelling mistake with an E after the Fs. So that will fix the first one. Now, for the matches, for it to go through and expect multiple objects returned in the array, we need to change array here to be expect min. So I have to use the min one. Let me find it. Min array like. So if we change it to min array like, we can specify that we expect a minimum of one object returned, but we don't specify a maximum because we don't know. It could change. So it will just go through and match all of them. So now if we change this array to min array like, then we've got T and do 1. Cool, and then that should resolve. Another thing that we need to make a change with is we actually need to remove the object. So it already kind of accounts for objects to be expected when you return multiple. Just something interesting that I realized when I was working with this is that I had to remove the first object. Oops, I've just deleted that. So if you send through multiple types of matches, it will just auto-assume that we're sending through an object, but we still need the close object at the end and the close array. So with that, all the consumer-side errors that were being displayed initially should be fixed. So we just need to rerun MUnit test. So if you go back to the test and right-click to run it again. Cool. So while that's going, I will bring up how we start the PACT service from inside the Java code. So inside of src main Java PACT, we've actually got PACT service.java file. So in here, we call the function, if I scroll down, start PACT service. And what we're doing is we're actually using a runtime to execute a command, and that command is an sh command that will run the PACT JVM server with the service ports and the mock server port that we want it to be at. So that's how we always ensure that it's at the same port, so we don't have to worry about the dynamic port changing that the PACT JVM server can do. So that's how we're running the server from inside the Java code. Cool, so that's finished. We can now, need to run the provider again. So back to tsupplier and then run tsupplier. Cool. And then for the close, we save that runtime command to the PACT service, so it's actually a process. We can then call destroy to close it down, which is part of our cleanup step. And then PACT mock server. So in here, it calls, we're using HTTP post request to create the mock provider with the PACT body, which has got all those interactions inside of it to set up the mock provider. And that's where you see the run the PACT mock provider server outputted out. And again, for the write file, we're calling the complete endpoint, which is what we call after the MUnit validation has completed. So that's now running. We can again go to Etty and run nvm pact verify, and hopefully those errors that we saw earlier have now gone. But we have some more errors. So this is now where we're getting a bit closer into, is it a consumer error or is it a provider error? So we've got to do a little bit of debugging here. So we can see it's now doing T with the location of 1, so the index 1 and the cost. So we can see that it's expecting it to match with 0 to 9. This is only taking into account numbers, not decimal points. So we need to, as a consumer, fix that. It was part of the specification that we were given. But the second one, we can see that we're being returned a string, and we expect it to be in integer. So this is from the provider. The provider is sending us back a string number instead of an integer. So we can deduce that that's some issue at the provider side with them not sanitizing their data before they send it to us. So that will be a provider error that they need to fix because they've broken our contract. So we'll fix the first one with our regex correction. So if we go back to the VNC and then tbuilder, here we'll actually do /d for digit with plus, and another /, a dot and a question mark. So it's optional if it's going to be at a small point place or not. And 2 more backslashes, sorry, and a D and a star. So that's just some simple regex, D for digits. So we're saying any other digits, multiple of, which will mean that it won't be just one place. Now we need to run, once you've saved it, the MUnit test. So click run and click yes. And then just give it a bit more time. And there we go. So we can see it's come through, and that's all green. So now we know that the PACT file is up to date. We can go back to the tsupplier and run the provider one more time with right click. So while that's going to take a little bit of time to do, we'll just take a last look at our last Java file, which is the PACT contract builder. So this is where it's taking in all those arguments that we set up inside of Mule with the variables. And what we're doing is we're doing some logic with setting it up in a way that is expected with the consumer PACT builder. With the consumer, and then has PACT with, so we're calling all these values from that object that I showed you earlier in the data weave in the resources, along with the endpoint that we set, and then the method, and then we've got the request body. And then because we're checking here, if it's not a string, if it's not an empty string, then we set it. But if it is, it'll just be an empty object, like so. And then we set the response that we expect, and that has the setup for the provider response body with all those PACT DSL expected setup. Now if we go to WETI, we can click MVM PACT verify, and we should see only the provider error. So you can see it's just one provider error with the integer string. Now, because this is all in development and early stages, and it's not connected to a database, if we go to tsupplier, we can see for the get t in the set payload, we're just calling, we're just reading the get t or t mock data from here, which is inside of src main resources. That's the MUnit example. So make sure you're in the tsupplier. src main resources, and then get t, and then all t mock. Open that one up. And really simply, we can just remove those quotation marks to change it into a number. And then make sure we save that. It doesn't refresh, so just right click back on tsupplier and click stop project. And then just keep right clicking, and eventually it will pop up again once it's all stopped it, and you can run the provider one more time. All right, so if I go back down, we've got an interaction builder function. So inside of PACT contract, PACT contract builder, we've got quite a lot of logic going on where we're setting up the request for the interactions. So there's a lot of data there. If anyone's savvy with Java, it might be something interesting to read through. Always welcome to feedback as well on how we can make it a bit more efficient. So now that's deployed, a final run, and it should all pass. And we should have a OK, yes. So build succeeded, so our contract is complete. We've got matching body OK and status code 200 OK. So yes, our test now passes, which is great. That's all that we were going to do for this one. So if anyone's got any questions, if not, I'll move on to just some kind of thoughts that I want to leave with. So a little bit of the caveats with this solution. It does require quite an in-depth knowledge about how the different parts connect together. So we're using JVM server, we're also using PACT within Java, within MUnit code. We're also using MUnit and MuleSoft. So there's a lot of different parts that are all connecting together to create this solution. It can be a little bit slow to create from the consumer side. So most of the work that we do is on the consumer side, with it being consumer first approach. So you set up the contracts with the DSL PACT bodies. Another one is I don't yet have an example for the provider with provider states. So where we can set it up so that it returns a certain type of data that we're expecting from those endpoints, which is present in other versions if you're using more like native, like .NET or Java by itself versions of PACT. But it's still useful because it is compliant to the Mule way. So if you want to add more to your testing alongside your MUnit tests, it does give you that extra little bonus with you also being able to do contract testing, which in itself is quite valuable because you can have different teams working independently, ensuring they're all forming to the same contract with that PACT file. Yeah, and it just provides extra benefits on top of the MUnit tests. Cool. So if there's no questions so far, I want to say thank you to everyone, and also a big thank you to the PACT Foundation for the stickers that they've given. They're kind of dotted everywhere if you want to pick up a PACT sticker. Yeah, and then if there's any questions, feel free to ask me, and if not, stay for a chat. We'll have pizza hopefully arriving later on, if not already here. Yeah, I think it's here. It's on its way. Okay, maybe I was a bit too quick. Yeah, so, and for those watching online, I hope you enjoyed it. Give the YouTube video a thumbs up. It really helps the algorithm. Yeah, I think that's everything. Thank you.